In this conversation with Rhonda Mills, my friend and trainer, we're going to talk about how body awareness can support you in different situations, how to access genuine curiosity in such situations, and also about making things visible that are not visible in the conflict. So, hello everybody, my name is Ivana, and I'm the host of these conversations that are devoted to how to build peace, resilience, how to build conflict resilience, how to learn about different skills that are useful for us in these times. And as we enter this conversation, I would like to also invite you to just tune in and sense your body as you're arriving here. Notice how your breath is. Notice your connection to the ground so that you can listen not only with your mind, but also with your full body and be connected. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Rhonda Mills, my friend Rhonda. Rhonda has worked with multiple healing modalities for over 2 decades. She currently coaches individuals and couples, leads group trainings, and also facilitates global social witnessing. Rhonda's work is informed by trauma healing principles, embodiment, heart-connected communication, spirituality, social justice, and the necessity to both connect more deeply with our identities and to transcend them. You can learn more about her work at transformationplayground.com and embodiedwitnessing.org. So welcome, Rhonda. It's lovely to see you.
Ivana, it's so good to be here with you. And yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about this topic. I think it's really a beautiful topic that you're bringing.
Yes, and I also like what happens in our connection and the field that we can create together when we hold our events, for example. And I'm very curious to know, like, how has your take on conflict resolution and human interaction evolved over the years? Because I know that you have an interesting background also in yoga and different modalities. Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, it's evolved quite a bit. And it's interesting to think about that. You know, when I first got in, I learned first about nonviolent communication in 2005. And the reason I wanted to learn about it was to support me in interpersonal relationships. And, you know, later as I was learning and integrating the process and working with others in the process and teaching it some as well, when I would work in a mediation or conflict resolution context with couples, I would often be triggered myself. I mean, I think that there was something originally about, how do I know who to give attention to? Is it this person and that person? And it would seem they would have like these competing priorities. And even for me back then at the level of needs, it would often kind of stimulate my inner conflict in those settings. And so I did not like doing that work back then. I stayed away from working with couples or working with people who wanted very specifically conflict resolution related to a particular topic. And, you know, that I've softened over the years around that. And I would say that my interest is still, like, I'm very interested in what creates the sense of separation kind of in the first place. Over the years, I've kind of grown to see that most external conflicts also reflect an internal conflict in each person, and how to make that more visible, because when that happens, then all of a sudden it becomes very interesting. like what's really going on here. But that takes a little more time. And in a way, I think it's kind of more depth work. So this is some of the ways that that's evolved for me.
Okay, so I hear it's like also uncovering the deeper layers below the surface, yeah, and the conflicts.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm curious, when you work with groups or when you work with couples and individuals, I'm wondering how your body awareness and body wisdom informs and supports your work.
Well, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I think it's really kind of a major foundation in how I work. And, you know, even right now, you know, the sense of my sense of my grounding and feeling my body, my hips on the chair, my feet on the floor, and, you know, even a little deeper into the earth. It's like, then that becomes a resource. It's like my body somehow gives me more space to, well, to not know, for one thing, and to be with whatever emotions are coming up in the people, and also their points of view that, you know, are coming through their thinking. And, you know, without my body as that resource, I think that it could become very overwhelming as far as like, how do I know what to focus on? So for me, part of how I know what to focus on is by feeling my body and my grounding. And that informs me of maybe the next thing I might say or ask.
Oh, okay, so it gives you, I hear that it gives you orientation. The grounding helps you kind of decide also what you want to focus.
Yeah.
And it's nice for me that you mentioned that, because I'm also feeling myself as I listen to you and the connection. Yeah. What do you think can contribute to our resilience in terms of interaction with others in everyday life? Because it seems that we're living in demanding times. There's a lot of turmoil going on. And I'm wondering how you see, like, what helps us kind of have more capacity for what is happening, and to not to lose the connection with ourselves, and maybe our ability to get back to connection and peace.
Well, that's such a great question. And I think it's a really profound question. Like maybe it's actually the question of our times. Like, how do we connect with and draw from our own resilience and our resourcing so that we can live day to day in whatever is there in our lives? So, you know, when you were speaking or asking me the question, one of the first things that comes up is, well, I think your work is really great for people to do that, because I know you're also working with mediation and somatic experiencing. And, you know, by definition, that's a resource that field of work helps people touch their resilience. And more broadly speaking, and I think it's something about, as human beings, we don't do things alone. We're not really wired, you know, as these individual beings who develop all these capacities in complete solitude and separation from everybody else. And many of us, we've grown up in today's world. You know, we're alive today, which means we've likely been steeped in some kind of separation and trauma, whether or not it takes many forms, you know. And so to me, the restoration of that comes through contact, asking for support, receiving support, kind of the humanity of, I don't know something, I might need support here, and that's actually a strength, not a weakness. And so for people to really build their resilience and have access, I think there's something about connection and asking for support and resonance, and help. And I think that can take many, many forms. You know, it can be a coach, a course, a therapist. It can be an orientation in people's own relationships, where they find, oh, when I speak with that person, I really feel felt and heard. And that's builds resilience. So yeah, such a good question, good topic, I think.
So what I'm hearing is that it's actually helpful to connect, like to reach out from the state of, or to admit that, okay, some things are better to do it with some support with another human being. I'm wondering how you see the role of the third side when there is a conflict. In which way is it specific, or what difference does it make when there is a third side for you?
Yeah, I think it's important first to say that there are many forms of support and third side and mediation. There are different styles, there are different orientations. And I want to just acknowledge and appreciate how many options there are. That's very important to me. And what I can say for me, both when I've received kind of what I would call third side support, in connection with someone else or in a group, and when I'm offering that in my work, there is something for me about grounding and making space to perceive and allow what's already here anyway. So I see, in a way, my role when I'm working this way as to uncover and make more visible maybe the emotions that are present that haven't been, people are constricting themselves to try to hide that, and then that creates a stress. So there's something about uncovering in a gentle way, or supporting people to be able to do that, and making visible. And so it's not so much for me in my work about giving my opinion or even actively resolving the conflict. I think there's something about when we make visible what's here with a resource, life's natural movement is connection, creativity, and flow. So I'm more looking to remove what's getting in the way of that in whatever way that I can. And so that's my orientation.
Yeah, thank you. So making visible what's already there. And it sounds to me also like you're adding the ability to witness, as the third side, the one who can somehow host what is happening or support that process so that it can naturally shift or move.
Yeah.
Since I'm interested in like innovation and inspiration, what do you think? What are the most innovative, unexpected, fresh kind of interventions in some difficult situations between people in terms of communication or conflict? What are some of the most interesting interventions that you have experienced, either what you did or what the others did?
Well, I'm thinking of a moment when I was with a small organizational team of about 5 people, and I really didn't understand the technical nature of their work. But what I did understand was their dynamic, or just to be present, how it felt to me. And so they had gotten in a conversation, and I was really there to support flow for them. And there was a moment when something felt stuck, and basically my intervention in that moment was just to say how I felt energy constricting. And I don't even remember the exact content of it, but I remember that it was a very particular sense that I had that didn't seem directly related to like the content or the words they had said. And there was a moment of silence. And then one of the people in the group felt a connection to that and began speaking something that he hadn't given himself permission before. There was something of, I have a sense, kind of in retrospect, that he felt witnessed, like something he was feeling was witnessed in what I said. And that then he felt then a permission or invitation to open it up. And then the group moved. And it's so interesting when this can happen, when in some cases it's about sort of technical content, which I don't know about, but I can feel dynamics and speak to. And so, yeah, for me, that really, was fresh and exciting. It felt so good in my body,
Yeah,
you know? Yeah.
So it sounded like you have aligned yourself with what was happening, and maybe it was even helpful that you weren't so knowledgeable about the technical content, because you could witness it in a different way. And by doing that and naming that also, it was an invitation for that participant, that person, to share something related to that, and that shifted something.
Yeah, the whole thing really flowed from there, because I think it turned out that what he was holding back, it opened something for everybody, what he said. And I find that really fascinating. That sense of alignment, both for me within myself and my vertical, but also kind of relating and curious, and having the sense that whether other people are orienting that way, they also have a reason for being there. In nonviolent communication language, we would say they have needs that are alive, but, in a way, they have a motivation, they have some kind of purpose that's served by being there, or they wouldn't be. And so I think there is something about being an invitation for that kind of alignment. And then from an aligned place, flow does happen. So it all sounds a bit esoteric, but I think in the actuality of it, it's actually quite practical. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I can, from my experience, I know that how it can save time, because then we're on the right track. We're not kind of getting confused, but we kind of connect to what is alive in that moment, which brings me to the question about the role of language. Because you have mentioned nonviolent communication. We are both certified trainers of nonviolent communication. And how do you see the role of language in conflict resolution or building peace resilience, conflict resilience? And also, like, how has this evolved for you over time?
I think that there are ways that for me it has evolved quite a bit over time, and then there are ways in which it hasn't. As a student of other processes in addition to nonviolent communication, conscious listening and the work of Gay and Katie Hendricks and Thomas Hubel and transparent communication, and even in the yoga and the meditation tradition, there was a way we were trained to work with clients or to listen in a particular way and ask particular questions. And so those were all methodologies that at times in my work, I was working through that methodology. Like in nonviolent communication, I would be really consciously attuning to feelings and needs, and then coming from a place of inquiry. And in a way, I would run it through my language system, feeling and needs in the English language, and then ask about that. So it was kind of coming through language in the way that I was thinking, and then language in the way that I would choose to speak. And I think I have found in all of those processes a lot of beauty in that particular methodology and way of asking questions or speaking. And I think then a way for me that it hasn't changed is also related to words, and also related to where the words are coming from, which is that even when I get a very strong kind of intuitive, I would call it hit or knowing about my sense of what the other person is experiencing, and it may come very strong. I may see an image or emotion might come through me, or, I may hear a phrase in my mind that's not my phrase, but no matter how kind of sure I am of what I kind of have a sense is going on over there, to really come from a place of genuine curiosity and to let my words convey that I am not an authority telling someone what they're thinking, what they feel, what they need. I'm noticing something and then asking a question and allowing and inviting them to be really connected with their own experience, possibly at a deeper level, and to reveal that. And for me, that really, it's a dedicated practice of genuine curiosity is the most important thing. Because otherwise I might unconsciously, with my own biases or things that are not visible to me in the moment, kind of put my idea of the person onto them. And then when, I might do that, as I think as human beings, any of us can do that at any moment. It's okay, it's human, but my practice is to not do that as much as I can, and really to be an invitation versus kind of imposing something from my side.
Yeah. So I guess that for that, you also need to be aware and aware of the choice that you have, that you want to be in that state of genuine curiosity, as you name it. And imagining, like, as I listen to you, I'm also imagining my situations, some of them challenging, sometimes with my child or with my parents or with ex-partner or something like that. So I'm wondering what helps you to dwell in that place of genuine curiosity, or to be able to return to that place.
Well, a lot of practice and a lot of support is part of it, and I think, for me, there's also this somatic quality, like when I'm in a genuinely curious place, to notice how that feels in my body. And for others, it may feel similar to what I am about to describe, or it may be different. But, for me, there is a groundedness, there is a forwardness, like a willingness to relate, but there's also a backness into my spine. There's something, it's hard to be genuinely curious for me when I'm stressed, or I've kind of constricted my body. Maybe I've kind of rised up out of stress, or I'm out here because I'm just so want to resolve the issue. And none of those are wrong, but just to know that those constrictions, while they're so human, when I'm feeling that, what I need, and I've learned, through years, maybe even a couple of decades, to more and more recognize when that happens, so that I can, like, oh, look, that's happening. How can I be tender? And okay, well, look, here's my body. Here's the ground. Here's a resource. Maybe it's something beautiful around me. Or maybe I remember my intention or the love between me and the person, and that becomes also a resource. So I can settle, and then that opens it back online, but I think it's a practice, and it's a deep, very deep practice.
I could imagine, like, moment to moment, and I hear how it helps you to connect to a certain felt sense that you can recognize. Okay, this is the felt sense of being too much, like, out of my center. This is the felt sense of being stressed, and this is how just curiosity, relaxed curiosity feels. Yeah. I like listening to that, because it reminds me to go with my awareness back into my body. Yes, and you have mentioned some, like, resources also the reminder that you kind of remind yourself of the love you have for the person. And I'm wondering what your resources are, like what brings you back to peace, back to that state.
In my own personal life, like day to day. Yeah.
I think it's inspiring sometimes to share that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, there's a few things on different levels. Like, there are a few things that I can really feel motivate me. One is really a spiritual practice. It's like a devotion. That really touches me just to speak to, because I can feel the softness in me about, my connection with the divine. And for me, that's not necessarily in a particular form, embodied form, but it's more about love. It's about aspiration, that's moving upward. And it's also about the beauty of nature. the earth, the mystery of the seasons. Why does the moon, all these things, like, so there's a devotional quality, and there's something about me being a part of that that's very, it fuels me and motivates me. My children who are now in their 20s, being a parent is a big motivation for me. And it's actually a joy. Maybe it has to do with my children remind me that what I'm doing in my own life and relationships and peace work is not just for me. It's also for my children, and it's of course also for many others, just around me through our life's interconnection. And my children, there's something about being a parent that is a motivation for me. So those are a few things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, as we're kind of mentioning the others and our interrelatedness, I'm wondering, how do you see kind of our societal resilience in those times, or how can we support this? I know it's a big question, but maybe you have an idea.
Yeah, well, I love that question because that's very touching, and now I'm reminded of the work of Thomas Hubel and the interconnection and the interrelationship between our individual experiences and our ancestral experiences, and where do we live on the planet, and what is our time of life, our age. So there's something about how that process is also impacting our ancestral line, and it's also impacting the whole and the culture. And so for me, they're not separate things. Certainly there's so much polarization in this world, and fragmentation, and so many symptoms of disconnection, and pain and trauma. There's no shortage of that. But I think, one of my motivations is global social witnessing, which also you and I have been doing together in the nonviolent communication trainer community. And so for me, that's an example of, and I think there are many examples, and to me, that's one that I'm particularly drawn to, where we come together with the intention to be present in our own individual selves, and also be present with the group that's there. Maybe it's 10 people or 15 people or whatever. And then also to give our attention together to something larger in the world. Like sometimes in our gatherings, we're giving attention to the whole trainer community, but we could also be giving it attention in a practice, and sometimes due to something painful that happened in the world, or a war or something. And to me, it's so beautiful that it's possible to come together, feel a resource individually, feel a resource together. And then when we give our attention to something difficult, I believe we add resource to that, and we also make our own world bigger and more whole and more inclusive. Thereby we're softening some of those fragmentations, not just in us, but in the world. And so that's my most particular way to turn towards that. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the question, because I think that's a lovely contemplation question for anybody to ask themselves in their own life. Because I think we all have a way that we feel ourselves connected to the world. And yeah, remembering that, finding a way to participate in that is sustainable and nurturing for us is, that's very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I can sense the energy, and I know that how much you love this practice and how much you want to be part of this and develop it. And also reminds me of what I heard from Thomas, whose work I've been also following, that what happened, the wounds that happened on a collective level need to be addressed on a collective level. So certain things
Yes.
we can't really deal by ourselves individually. We need to create a coherent field for that in which it can land. And that's comforting in a way, knowing that we don't need to do it just by ourselves. We can do it together. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that kind of circles back around to, the question earlier about asking for help or support. Because there are certain things in our life, it's not actually an individual problem. So an individual resource won't be sufficient. We need each other. And so
or what came to me is like connect also and ask for the spiritual support also. Like
yes.
creating the landing field for that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would like to add at this point.
Well, what comes to me, Ivana, is like, because for me, I will tend to go to these deeper underlying principles which really motivate me and inform me and are so key in my work. And what comes to me is to actually ask you, related to the work you're doing in mediation, and I know you've been bringing in somatic experiencing and more explicitly combining them in your work. And I think that is so valuable and really a great example of the kinds of things that are needed in this world. And so I'm curious to ask you, what is it that you're doing related to the nervous system, related to embodiment, that allows conflict to be resolved, that allows that movement and connection to happen?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, because this has been really an interest of mine, because I also do groups where I teach mediation skills based on the beauty of nonviolent communication. And I try to add these elements of the body, because this is what I realized at some point in my study of nonviolent communication, that I really need to include and explore the body and how I am, because that was the limitation also for me in some conflict situations. It was the defense mechanisms of my body and my nervous system. So, and this is something that I play with also during mediation. First of all, I love entering the process, and the process itself can be a resource for me if I can tune in. So, and then because I also heard once, that was inspiration from Thomas, that it's maybe a good indicator, like how I do my work, whether I feel less or more energy afterwards. So I had this idea, I want to have actually more energy after I do a mediation or after I do a session. So this is also like a guide for me of how I do it. And then basically I do use my body as a grounding also for the parties, when there are two parties, because I see myself as a kind of a co-regulation help also for their nervous systems, and just for the very human defensive mechanisms that happen in mediation context, where it's like one specific thing is like the switching between some defense threat response and going back to safety. And that's where I can help as a mediator, with the tone of voice, with my body language, with my grounding, with my facial expressions, with just how I am in that moment. So sometimes I would say, like, some mediations I really mediated from the from the hara, more from the pelvis, from connection with the first chakra, with the legs. And then, of course, I try to use my body as a resonance board to sense, but still, I very much need to be centered in myself. And at the same time, so that's one thing, the body and the mindfulness, but then there is this tool, like this newer tool of language, and how to how to use a language that communicates safety, how to translate the things that I hear into expressions that are less threatening, that actually lessen the threat response that's there when you are with a person who you're having conflict or difficulties with. So, and sometimes it's about, yeah, as you said, like just stopping and sensing and maybe pointing the attention to what's happening right in that moment. There are the issues and the content, and something is happening also in the field, and that can be surprising. And that's, I think, what Marshall Rosenberg also referred to when he was saying that, okay, the place where we can enter healing is from the here and now.
Mm.
So that's my take on that.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And there were two main kind of points there that really stood out for me and also resonate with for me a lot. And one is like the interconnection of thinking and feeling and sensing and our bodies and our movement. And I believe you, like me, come from a yoga background. And for some
Yes.
time, like for me, I had an embodied practice. And I also had a spiritual practice. And then I had a nonviolent communication practice. And those things were not necessarily like overlapping fully in my system. They were separate things. And so part of what I'm hearing you talk about is like the interconnection, even of like you might mediate from the resource of your hara, the embodiment of your hara in your legs. And that's very exciting to me. And I'm imagining there'll be many people that can relate to that too. And then the other thing which really excites me, which, I think could be meaningful, not just for people who are mediators, but for anybody who could find themselves in a conflict, which is, what's happening with my energy? Am I draining myself? Do I feel drained after? Am I in a sustainable kind of a connection where I feel a similar sort of energy during and after, or maybe even building energy by how I'm connecting to intention or to the earth or to love, or, and because I love that you brought that in and you've made that an intention for yourself, because for me, it's so valuable when I feel drained after, which of course I used to, when I felt drained after, I would say, well, that's because that other person is so draining. And then it's like, oh, but wait, there's a way that I'm showing up that is draining myself. It's not wrong. It's likely a fear response. It's something from my past. It's, a stress response. But just to notice, like when I'm doing that, very practically speaking, I don't have the resources online in that moment to actually come close and discover something new. So without making it any right or wrong, that's so helpful to notice. I think it's very empowering, to notice. And again, as you described in the work that you're doing, but also just in a conversation, how am I showing up that maybe is draining myself or taking myself away? And of course, maybe I do want to walk away from that conversation right then.
Yes.
Or maybe there's a shift I can make, to bring more of myself online. And I believe that when people have had that kind of experience, for instance, in your workshops or in my work or in whatever we're doing, we start to be able to access it more and more in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
I think we first get it in an environment somewhere, and then we can internalize it. So that part's very exciting to me.
Yes, I find it's also like, yeah, in order to have that higher resolution, sometimes I need to slow down, or to get back online. So this awareness, mindfulness is very helpful for that. Also noticing that maybe not, sometimes I would say that I used to postpone these things, like, okay, I could feel the tension in me, but I will deal with it later. And now I'm experimenting also, like how is it to fluidly feel it and slow down a little, readjust myself. And then, yeah, there's more space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I really resonate. And it does occur to me that sometimes slowing down can take courage,
Yes.
because if we're
Yes.
in an exchange and it's a little bit scary or stressful, we might feel, oh, but I have to go quickly or match the pace of the other person. And so it's so lovely to practice mindfulness. And it's also it's a courageous, empowered act to take
Yeah.
a breath and slow down. It's
Yeah, and
yeah.
what you just showed, this kind of like I have to, and how it manifests in the language, or these
Mm,
nagging thoughts that we might be having, or some kind of body
yeah.
pose. That's already a manifestation of higher arousal. I'm not just
Yes.
in the I can, but I have to. So I'm getting mobilized. So I think like noticing these movements inside enables me to do something with them, like take a breath, or yeah, maybe orient myself in the space and notice something that is pleasant. Yeah, see where I have like strength in my body. And this way, like the awareness that I'm an organism that's trying its best to deal with what the situation is, and also in mediation, seeing the others underneath the personalities and underneath the content, just as organisms also that are trying to deal the best they can with the situation. It's a very forgiving experience. So
Oh, that's very
I like that.
touching.
So
Yeah, me
somehow I like
too.
the simplicity of that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I just want to add that when I mean, this is like more uncovering, but in the same way that were touched when you referred to the spiritual resource. For me, it's also like mediation is a very spiritual practice. Being a third side is a very spiritual practice. So it's like I do tend to, yeah, sometimes include a prayer or a wish or an invitation for so that something can heal. So it's also important for me. Like this is a spiritual practice. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rhonda, for being part of this. It's a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Ivana. I really am touched that you asked me. I always love talking with you, and what a great topic of this interview series that you're doing. It's really dear to my heart. So thank you for inviting me.